Generation podcast. I'm Michael Martin with my other co-host, Michael's daughter. What's going on, Mike?
Going very good. Had a lovely breakfast this morning with people I met. We could say fan of the podcast, but I think I'd be putting the cart before the horse. It was about 2 years ago. I met Kevin, whose bride Marie is has a sister who's married to a guy who likes Michael Martin, and somehow that came out at a party where this guy wasn't out.
Weird. I'm
Yeah.
married to a guy who likes Michael Martin.
Yeah, like he's married to he's been married to a girl whose sister's husband likes Michael Martin.
Okay,
And
there you
it came
go.
out at a party. It was really a delightful party. And then it got, I think there was familiarity with the podcast. Now, a year and a half later, there's more familiarity with the podcast. But I met with a former student. No, but I met with two wonderful couples, Kevin and Marie, and Derek and Tina. And we talked about some pretty intense stuff today. Yeah, Derek we got to have these people on in different permutations and combinations. But Derek himself is a PhD, very familiar with Russian sociology.
Okay.
University of Toronto, real interesting guy. I think much more of a radical than even he's aware. You know.
Cool.
Yeah, so that'll be great. And so, how was your morning?
I'm still mourning the passing of brother Wayne Kramer of the MC5. I don't know if you heard.
No, tell me what's going on.
Wayne Kramer. Nobody knows who that is unless you're from Detroit. And you're a white boy from Detroit. Then you totally know, especially when you grew up in the '70s like I did. You know who the MC5 was. You know who Ted Nugent was. You know who the Stooges were, right? Alice Cooper. That was the Detroit sound, right?
But was Bob Seger part of that?
Pardon me?
Was Bob Seger central to that?
Bob Seger was part of that too, yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. So when I came up, we were like a generation after these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that MC5 DNA was so burned into my soul. So here's a great story. I was 22 probably. And my friends used to host this jam night at this bar on the east side of Detroit. And I would go because all the musicians from City would be there. And we'd all get up and play something, right? And so I went in there and I had my guitar and I'm sitting at my table drinking a beer with who's the guy who's now my brother-in-law. And at that time we were in a band together. And I see Rob Tyner, the lead singer of the MC5, walk in. And I'm like, he's going to play. And it was technically a hold my beer situation. I told Jay, I said, hold my beer. I'm going to go play. I'm going to go sit in with Rob Tyner. So I talked myself on stage and I played. Let me see if you guys can finish this sentence.
This is about the 5th time we've played it. Lindsay, you're welcome, Lindsay Rose. We're going to introduce you more.
I'm going to get there.
Go. I like
kick out the jams.
Okay.
What comes next? Kick out the jams. Do you know?
Can you sing it?
No, it's the beginning.
It just says kick out the jams.
Well, no, if you grew up in Detroit in the 70s,
okay,
60s, early 70s, you knew that it goes, kick out the jams, motherfucker. Which is how they started the song on this album, Kick Out the Jams. And I played that song with Rob Tyner and this other song.
Fun.
And it was like, I just landed. And it was a kind of a peak experience because I didn't make any mistakes.
Awesome.
For one thing. Or break any strings. But anyway, so that was kind of reminiscing about Wayne Kramer. He died yesterday of pancreatic cancer at the age of 7.
That's what took my mom out at age 52.
Well, those guys were still kicking around when I was a young man. So, but Rob Tyner died. I think they're down to 1 or 2 of the MC5. But the rhythm guitar player for the MC5, Fred Smith, was married to Patti Smith.
Oh, well, we all know her.
And Patti Smith lived in the Detroit area for the longest time.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So anyway, we're not here to talk about that, though I could. We're here to bring back fan favorite Lindsay Rose.
Shit, disproportionately. People
fan favorite.
Yeah, some local listeners would say, like, who was that? I've never heard her name after she first came on. We talked about the Underworld. That's kind of a trendy theme for the regeneration. And Lindsay, we got to get into, I've got 2 Underworlds I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
And I think it's really important.
I'm really down.
Yep. But yeah, and then what Lindsay did is maybe from the podcast, she took a deep dive with RJ Stewart, and she immediately kind of understood. Another kind of fan favorite is this Stephen Clark. We'll have to have Stephen and Lindsay on together. And Lindsay does this great mashup at her Twitter account, and also has just a really wonderful article that I was privileged to read in the most recent edition, the most recent issue of Jesus the Imagination. Welcome back, Lindsay.
Thank you. Very happy to be here, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Where?
Can we let's dive on in, because I was talking to these people with breakfast this morning, and our listeners can say, oh, okay, it's out of the way. You know, Mike word vomited again on this one. Two underworlds, Lindsay. I think there's two underworlds.
Yes.
One is, and we had some correspondence, listeners to the podcast, and Michael, a little bit about feudalism. So listeners would know lately I'm festering that maybe possibly when I put together the ruminations of our friend Guido, I think it's there. Again, I've mentioned in Walt Whitman's essay on Shakespeare, there's a certain type of temperament, maybe a certain strand of thought. I think it tends to come from the American land, and it might be our strand of thought that looks, they say, if there's feudalism in something, then it's got to go. Because for them, to a certain temperament, they say this means, even if we softened it up with just wonderful manners, and we put a nice rosy hue on it, you know, it's still putting a boot on somebody's face. And then you have the Stephen Clark underworld. So feudalism would say we go into the underworld, and we could think, I think, two things about it. One has to do with the number of people involved. We could think of, and clarify this for me, Lindsay, and this isn't, I'm not trying to portray yours. We could think of like dwarves and elves and kind of these subterranean gnomes and things. And they're cute, but we think of them as group entities. And then there's this other underworld, but there's the soft red hue on it. And I think it's more the Stephen Clark underworld. And you still have Our Lady of Guadalupe. But he says from the underworld tradition, we're getting things like jazz music, abstract expressionist art. You know, the best book on the icon I know, Elaine Besancon, is called The Forbidden Image. It ends with, where's the iconography in today's world? And it's Kandinsky and abstract expressionism. You know, this would be anathema to the ortho bros. It comes up in 12-step spirituality. It comes up in like civil rights movements. And one thing about it is, I'll mention that John Cowper Powys, you know, who walked America. He's a great underworld explorer, but he knew something new was being born, and I've mentioned this before. And he found it, if people want to look up Farewell to America, an essay Powys wrote when he left. And it reminds me of what Peter Kingsley does with Young coming to New York. He saw the same thing, metal, rock, and everything, saw the same thing. But when Powys left, he said a new person was being born in Iowa or in the Midwest. And it was a person for whom, from the British Isles, was impregnated with the aura of the British class system, the upper, lower, middle class, and things like that. And he thought it stood in the way of anything good and noble and beautiful coming. And he thought in Iowa, the earth, the American landmass and the earth, a divine feminine had given birth to somebody who was finally free of this horrible thing. You know, and so the idea was just call me John. And so so we have the fruits of one, kind of counterintuitive, abstract expressionism, 12-step movement, civil rights. And then this underworld that I see in Stewart, which I myself partake of so much, where you have guided meditations and you go down stairwells that are very medieval feeling, and you lift up old wooden doorways. Tell me how that resonates with you, Lindsay. You know, is it a distinction with a difference? Or is it meaningless?
I don't know. For me personally, I would probably disagree with Stephen that jazz and abstract art is an underworld feature. What's interesting, I actually just listened to the interview from him with you guys a couple of days ago, and I really do think that there is a quality of like the disjointed astral that comes into effect with those types of, especially the idea of like the bright shiny towers and the rising of non-land based architecture, or you know the things you see in like in New York with the Empire and the Chrysler Building and stuff like that. This grand like uprising seems to be more of an astral. Let's do Tower Babylon. Let's go up higher and higher versus a sinking down into the earth, which is where the underworld kind of comes into collapse. So I would say that I think that the underworld that I see. I've read the Mexican Mysteries that Stephen Clark wrote, and which are great chapters and really informative and beautiful. I've also been reading a little bit of Henri Corbin and this idea that there really are two darknesses, there really are two underworlds. There's that idea of like the frightening or the hellish realms, and then there's those that where you kind of go into the womb of the earth and the idea of the mother and this rebirth that can happen to the self. That is, you know, the thing that you see with you know, even the iconography of like Christ leaving the pairing of hell is this beautiful like exit out of the womb shape of the you know the Vesica Pisces, and he comes back into the earth fully reborn, and he's laid waste to the darkness that can feudalize the soul, right? So I would start there.
Yeah, I think that's important because I think the Hobbit people, the distributists who don't actually do distributism, they just drink ale and smoke pipes and
Smoke pipes.
We just got a comment this morning on our old show on distributism, Michael, where somebody said, like, you guys should just join orthodoxy. Willfully mishearing us.
How we said, yeah.
Oh God, no, but
it was a great listener.
Those guys, and they don't take the orcs seriously. It's all.
I'm taking them very serious.
So it's kind of like the proper. It's like the Wind in the Willows version of the New Age. You know what I mean? And it kind of idealizes it. But I think the thing is, and Lindsay, you're talking about, is the other world has just as many jerks as this world does.
And Clark makes that clear. So what do you make of that, Lindsay? Put what even you heard from Clark. They don't necessarily want you there. And one other piece that I want to weave in here, which is that the underworld that's kind of dawning on me with this, the themes of liberty, the themes of the end of feudalism and so forth. It can look to us. Sometimes we have to want the right thing. We're all familiar with that language.
Yes, to want.
But it would look to me at first take when we think of this Iowan, it's kind of boring, right? Where there's another underworld it looks so colorful. And that's part of this return to the Shire. People love it. It's got banners, it's got gonfalons and things like that. But this other one, if we get down 2,000 years after the incarnation, where the importance of like the gospel, the equality of all souls, like if we really got to get down to what is this gospel about? It doesn't mean the uniformity of all souls. I get it.
No, absolutely not.
We're so worried about the uniformity of all souls that I don't think we're willing to give liberty and this kind of Iowan thing that we could look more the same instead of just tattooing ourselves and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. I dress a certain way, but it looks boring. But to produce this thing, it could be, we might need a higher artistic vision for abstract expressionism. I just don't know. No, but it's the role of the individual is the thing I wanted to highlight. Then I'm done. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Even this is something that both Kingsley talks about and Jung as well, is like the difference between individualism and individuation, and that is an individual is someone who tries to strike out as a unique. Often I feel like individualism has an ego pull to it to a certain extent. In that, if you look at all the different types of groups out there, whether it's on Twitter or just in society, even if you're going to be, you still belong to like this identification, right? And everyone kind of has their uniform. If you're going to be a beatnik or a poet, or you're going to be a jazz musician, or you're going to be, into what was I going to say, the business, the hippie, the trans identified, whatever it is, everyone still to a certain extent begins to look the same. They can, whether they dye their hair or they wear a certain suit, or they will never touch, non-organic linen or whatever, all those different things. Individuation is a difference because it requires emotional maturity, and you've had to confront, for one, your own sins in your own soul, and grappling with that to come actually out of childhood, which is kind of like, it's interesting when we see all that's happening in the world right now, and you can kind of look at the state as a narcissistic parent because most of us haven't grown up yet, and coming to bear with that as and look what we have with our colleges, and Michael can break me up here in academia, so can you, of course, the prolonged nature of adolescence and pathological adolescence that's happening in our society, helping no one. And they're instead of having heroes, even like John Power Powers. And I grew up in Iowa, so it's kind of funny to hear you say that. We used to sing songs about Iowa gold, and it was the heartland, and the soul was there, the world, and all those things. And
people want to escape it, but what are they escaping from? If it's all these questions interest me.
No, this is great, because this is what has been really powerful for me with the idea of the underworld, both with R.J. Stewart's and the Celtic and the kind of the fairy lore that happens even into the Gnostic texts, and the Ballymote and the Bruce Codex have these like mapping systems that create this the circular labyrinthine, or even the cubistic quality of that. What's really been powerful is to see how most, and maybe this is kind of the run-in we're having at this 2,000 years post resurrection, is that everyone is looking up. Everyone's constantly trying to escape out the top hatch. And what I love about the idea of the underworld, and even you read like Dante, is there's a road to Empyrean at the bottom of hell, right? There's, and sometimes you have to go all the way to the bottom to find your way back out. And that's maybe the point.
And you mentioned
Well
this
said.
is people don't want to grow up, and I see it all the time. I actually had an interesting conversation with one of my classes this week, because they're trying to pick out things to write an argument about, and there's some female athletes in there, and I was talking to them about having trans athletes compete against them and how that makes them feel.
How does that make you feel?
Well, no, because you
Yeah,
know
right, right. You just
they're
lost-
afraid
you
to
just
talk
lost
about
me.
it. They're
Yeah,
afraid I
right,
don't.
right.
They're afraid to say I don't like this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I try to in my classroom create an environment where, and I told them, they even asked me, "Do you tell us your opinions here?" I said, "Well, in class like this, you might get my opinions. When I teach in literature, we get my opinions about literature, but what I'm trying to do is, I'm old school, and so I'm the kind of professor who wants this to be a marketplace of ideas, and you can test out what you think in here, and someone might disagree, but that's okay. It doesn't mean I hate you, right?"
More of that.
And,
Yeah.
and they were like, "This is a new concept to us." But I think the other thing we're talking about with the underworld or the other world or whatever you want to call it, right, is, and I've been thinking about this lately because I wrote a couple last week, I think it was, I wrote that piece on Olivia Cheney after we did our interview with her.
She's lovely.
She is lovely. And we've been corresponding a little bit. And I was just thinking about it because, one of my touchstones in that article I wrote about her was the kind of similarities to where her place in Yorkshire to where I live. But the difference is, I think this little cottage they have in Yorkshire, it's got to be 500 years old. It's super old, maybe 400 years old, but it's 300.
I've got things to say about that. Yeah.
But it's older than this country, right? So it's weird, and Lindsay knows this because I just wrote a book of poetry about it that'll investigates a lot of this and mythologies of the wild of God. Part of what I do in that is try to investigate or see what stories live in this landscape.
Yes.
Right. And I think there are resonant, and now it's going to come through me. It's a little bit Celtic because I have a lot of Celtic in my blood, right?
Bring it.
But I think you see it in the Celtic mythology that there's something really ancient there. And I think what I think, if you look at England, in England, legends and especially fairy tales and fairy lore, it's much more domesticated because England has been civilized for a lot longer than
That's
the
a
United
huge
States.
part. That's part of
And
where I
the
want to
US
go.
has not. I mean, this is the weird thing about the US is this continent has not been civilized for all that long. Yet in a way, there's a kind of patina or surface structure of hyper civilization, but it's not. It's not grounded, right? So that's one of the things I learned through the process of writing those poems is there's an ancientness and an otherworldliness of this landscape that has hardly been explored at all.
No,
Amen.
I love this very much because one of the things I have always wanted to do, or I feel even reading, all the Celtics that I've been reading as of the last year or two and diving into Peter Kingsley, who's also a Brit who came to the US for quite a number of years and is now back in Europe, and Stephen Clark's work as well, is that I remember even in grad school reading a collection of Native American philosophy. I forget who the author is, and forgive me, I'm so sorry. But the question is, if this is your land, where are your stories? And this idea of creating a narrative of what it means to be America or to be part of this landscape, what it means to be indigenous to a place because you've been born of the earth that's there. And I go, so where a lot of America, especially European ancestry, we're kind of orphans in a way because we've kind of shut off ourselves, unless you are a first or second generation, here you had a parent come, or you have, still family alive back in, Italy or Germany or something. You don't have the connection of that landscape. You don't have the connection of where all of your blood comes from. It has been severed to a certain extent. So having to reassociate ourselves with a place, I go, well, so where's my going America? Where's my, Green Knight? Where do I find the stories here that initiate me to this place that are still part of that grand cosmology?
Yeah, and Michael, you both hit it out of the park for me, thinking that this Powys essay on Farewell to America, I just think it's fun as we're also bored in school. He's conjecturing that, like, the Isles, the British Isles, that you have salt water lapping up on them all the time. It's drawing some of the magnetism that's not drawn from, say, the American heartland that he felt, right? And we need to be able to think like this and feel those things. And he would walk, he knew the difference between when you got close to the Rockies, the telluric force was there, and what was going on in other places for real. And the other one, and you alleged it, Mike, is about gardens. That in Europe, I mean, they've worked with nature so much, and they've kind of intermingled, and they live in an anteroom, that if you leave an English garden behind for a couple of weeks, it's going to be fine. But if you and I leave our gardens for a couple of weeks, like Mother Nature, she's encroaching really quickly.
It's
crazy. It's crazy.
It's wilder here.
Yeah, it's wilder.
Yeah. As a permaculturist I used to study, and he would say that the idea that the settlers who came to the US and went from east to westward expansion thought they had come upon this amazing new growth of amazing fruits and vegetables, and these amazing, almost Edenic qualities of food across the plains. And what they actually were stumbling into was like, the food forests that the indigenous populations had created here, and they had actually cultivated out the land, prickly pear and things like it grew, like, interstitially there. And it wasn't wilderness, or there really, wherever humans have been, wilderness gets, cinched a little bit, but hopefully for the co-benefit of all species, and not for, like, look at our Dust Bowl situation. It took us like less than 170 years to completely obliterate our soil. Like it didn't happen. It didn't take long.
It's crazy.
No,
so you're saying, Lindsay, you're just, go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's that it's a weird thing, because, and I think especially in contemporary American culture, and you can see this, I think particularly in the gender stuff, but in particularly the softening of the male, is that there's a real fear of the wild. There's a fear of wildness, and as a result, everything kind of gets flattened, and the wildness is still there. And I think that's when you see, these upsurges of violence. It's almost, you could look at it, if you look at it really more bigger picture, it's like, and even mass shootings or stuff like that, in a way, it's a kind of psychic eruption, because usually the people who do that are either on medication for psychotropic medication, or, I mean, by personality, they're not generally aggressive people. Right?
We'll go there.
Yes, no, 100%.
But there is an interesting Stephen Harabuna. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He was a master herbalist. He died a few years ago, I think, really recently after COVID. But he was lived in New Mexico for a long time, and I used to listen to his talks, his lectures, and he would discuss the fact that even how we walk into the woods these days, we go hiking, and you're up in the mountains and stuff, and we go on these long walks.
Urban outfitters.
Because we have eliminated so much of the large predator mammals, we don't think about walking into, unless you're in Wyoming or like Montana, you're not going to go find a black bear on your trail necessarily, or a moose or a cougar. I mean, it definitely happens, especially in the Rockies up here. But like, we walk into the woods banging and clamoring, thinking there's nothing out there but us. And so we've kind of lost a sense of awareness. When we walk out there, we're not present. We're talking, and we don't actually have our presence with us when we are actually navigating the world. I think that's one of the things that our culture these days is running through issues of meaninglessness, and what is how do I deal with life when there's been the loss, when we're going through this catapult into transhumanism versus the real human heart. This is the synthetic life that's kind of being presented as one. This is the better one. We don't even understand the difference, because we've been so trying to get out. The escapism has been so strong that we don't even know how to ground down and go discern, this is what's real, this is what isn't. And I think that's part of the idea. We don't actually know how to wrestle with our own darkness, our own danger. And so, wandering into the wilderness or wandering into the underworld is kind of the same thing, because there's a wilderness outside of us, and there's kind of one on the inside of us as well.
That you have to learn how to navigate, right?
Absolutely.
Map
is not the territory, as the saying goes, right?
What'd you say, Lindsay?
The map is not the territory.
Yeah, right, yeah.
No, I mean, because there's a lot of time, for people who are not familiar with hunting, for instance, the consciousness you have to get into to be successful at it is you don't just go out there. You have to, what's his name? Ortega y Gasset, the Spanish philosopher, in his book Meditations on Hunting. He calls it a vacation from modernity, from the human experience, because you kind of enter back into nature. You're a part of nature again, and you realize how enormously difficult it is, and then you have to adapt or adopt a new kind of consciousness.
Yeah.
That is difficult to do, which is actually, it was interesting to say that, because so many of the poems in my new book were written in the deer blind, which is why deer appear so much
I
in
had
the
some time.
book.
I laid out some stanzas.
Yeah, but it's like, no one's bugging me, no one's gonna interrupt. Uh, uh, but the other thing you're reminding, and I saw this recently in an interview with Jordan Peterson, and I think he's right, because he was talking about men have to be dangerous, but they have to know how to control it.
What a good man actually is. Yeah, a good man is a dangerous man. He knows how to keep his self in check. You know, until appropriate timing. A good man is often, we decide is good.
If you're not a dangerous man, you're no threat to anybody, and you're not going to protect anybody.
What about the affectation, Lindsay, of the affected dangerous man? Isn't that going to be a cultural thing? I mean, all of these phenomenon from the right just gives birth to affectations, whether it's like Catholic manhood, Nicorette, gum, a pipe, and a beard. Whether, well,
everyone have their uniform, right?
Yeah. Everybody's, so it's not, I'm not raising an objection at all, but it's the surrogacy of the wild is just so crazy now. But it's right, it's crazy. And then what do women think of that, Lindsay, when you see it? What do you think of that? You see a maturity thing too, right? That they haven't grown up.
I think there's a lot of people who, and I don't want to obviously cast aspersions on people, but like there's a level.
I find it all too easy.
I'm trying to like, how do I talk around this correctly? There's such a natural condition level of performance I feel like we have, and we've taken on as a society. The world's a stage Shakespeare, but it's even not even in a political sphere, but like so many people have, and maybe it's because like my dad died last year, and and then so like I really wrestled with this idea of like, how do you deal with the brokenness that you feel inside you when you're wandering around outside, and how are you? And no one wants to actually know about the brokenness inside or the hurt qualities of things, So you're having to learn how to navigate. This is the performance I put out in front of my company or my, my colleagues, my employer. This is how I do it around family or on people who might not be the levels of walls that the levels of Jericho inside of us that collapse down to that small child heart that just wants to be, to be at one with whether you God or the mother or, the however you want to discuss it. It's like from a Christian standpoint, it's like go lay your head in the lap of Mary. It's like just that quality of being, it's all going to be okay. Things are going to get better. And you look at the world and you go, it doesn't really look like that out here. And so that there's that wrestling of dissonance of how do you make plans? How do you strive for meaning? And some of these fitness bros or, it's this very much this masculine performance.
Fitness bros.
There's this quality of like they have so much energy and vibrancy, and we so need that, but it also needs to be directed. And I feel like what's so funny about being at the whole idea of like the trad bros is like this, the pipe and the suspenders, and it's almost I almost blame the hipster thing that started in 2008, 2009 is like an outset of
blame it on Mumford and Sons, right?
I love Mumford and
Sons.
I do too. When they went electric, I love them, but that's the whole Bob Dylan argument, right?
Yeah.
Right. But there's that quality of I see happening is the pendulum swing is so easy to find that in our society, especially right now, even between the sexes, if you go trad bro on all the girls, you're gonna eventually find what happened in like, the suffragette movement. I feel that one of the biggest issues that we have in this is a little off topic. I'm sorry if I'm soapboxing.
It's great.
Is that women especially, and maybe this is part of the whole idea of what the American landscape, the wilderness that's here can maybe reteach us, is that every single person wants to have value. They want to contribute value to their family, to their, good-hearted people. Obviously some people are just lazy. They don't want to do anything, but most people want to be of value to their society, to their world, to their families. And I think one of the biggest problems that happened with the kind of the erasure of the feminine was when the idea, who are you talking to? It's actually, I was out from one of your podcasts. Was it Matthew Milliner? Is that his name?
He's great. Yeah,
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 He's
yeah.
wonderful. And he was talking
G.K.
about
Chesterton and Native Americans.
right in the,
talking.
12th, like the 12th century, what was happening
Yeah.
in like 12th, 11th, 12th century Europe, and this flowering of this really integrated, beautiful contrast. You see that in Hildegard von Bingen's work and all of these beautiful things. And then all of a sudden between that and like Victorian Britain, you get this like this complete removal of the feminine's value to society. And when that happens, because some of us ladies are fiery, we go, well, fine. Well, we want to be of value. So where's the value you see? We'll go participate there.
Right.
You know, women are naturally, yes, we're nurturers, but not every single woman is meant to be, say, a mother necessarily, but we are transmitters of culture. We're gossipers. We spread stories. We spread civilization. We teach our children spirituality and religion as like heart milk, right? So when you remove something that wants somebody to be of value and you demote it, you're going to find it wants to erupt somewhere else, just like the violence that you see in these things. This natural valve that needs to happen. When the feminine is reduced, you get things like figures like, you know, like Boudica and Kali. They're going to come back to erect their importance. So you remember that the male and female is meant to work together. So,
well, and I think what you see is all these examples you were given, Mike. These are in the, you know, the distributist bros with the pipes. Those are caricatures.
yes.
They're
Where's
not authentic.
authenticity?
And when you guys are talking,
We got to go back to that. Circle back to authenticity.
So
Yep,
most
go.
of my friends around here, my friends in the city are different. Very often people in the city are plagued by all kinds of modern ailments. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But out here, the guys I know and I see most of the time, and it's not everybody out here, but it's the people I see on a regular basis, are dangerous men who have it under control. I was just, for instance, I saw one of them yesterday. So my sons are into archery and shooting sports and stuff, and I took them. It was a really cool thing they have at the sporting goods place here in Jackson. And so I was there, and I see my friend who is actually a lumberjack, and you know, and every time we talk, you know, I get with him and I get with the Amish, and the only thing we talk about are the weather and hunting, right? And you know, farming and stuff like that. And these are guys that could kill you, but you would never, they would never intimidate you. They were just super confident but gentle souls.
Isn't that the definition of good knighthood, though?
That's where I was going. Yeah, that's the Christian knighthood, right?
Yeah.
Because that's Galahad, that's Lancelot. I could kill you, but
I won't.
but I have their chivalry, right? And it's in those stories, right? It's the guys who don't follow the code who are the bad guys, who are the phonies, who are the dangerous people who need to be taken out, right? And this is how, and I think that's just, so it's nothing new to have posers.
Well, there's always been facade. That's even the word of glamour.
Agreed.
The word glamour and grammar come together, right? This idea of grimoire or grimoria it's magic. It's like, you know, it's the performance, it's the illusion of things, and we seem to be really, really good at that in modernity. But I think we're going to run into an issue of, as things become more and more synthesized and more AI and more technological, people are really going, just to keep their sanity, are going to really seek out what's actually real. If you can't be real, then you're not really trustworthy because you're part of a.
That's where it all circles back again.
Yeah.
You know, again, like I totally agree. We all have a certain number of facades and so forth. But when we're critiquing a certain form of orthobro, it's a matter of degree, not an argument about
And there are lovely orthobros out there as well.
There are.
I'm not arrows here.
But could we say again that, like, this, is it possible? Like, to the degree we might be able to get rid of feudalism. Maybe we can do, but is it possible that, like, when we talk about the younger generation, I think this is Generation Z, you know, that despite it being ubiquitous in their generation, this desire for authenticity, right? There's only one evil, and it's hypocrisy. But, you know, that's that yearning. I always say, you know, we talk about, like, hypocrisy in a little way being vice paying tribute to virtue, just a little bit, you know, but I don't mind the push for more and more and more authenticity, because I think that new type of human being. Now, you tell me, Lindsay, because you lived in Iowa, and it's not every Iowan, and I'm not trying to put them on a pedestal, but it can look boring. But the need for our species to get to that authenticity of just, you know, call me John, that might be the force And that's why, under the guise, like the worst being the corruption of the best, everybody's buying their authenticity now, but it's vanishing. It's vanishing. It's like the
It's cosmetic, right?
yeah,
It's cosmetic. Yeah, I mean, you know, John Carter Powys, and then you have also like you have John Muir coming from the Midwest and the back of New Hampshire coming into the West, and you know, everyone is looking for that thing that makes them feel whole, right? And I think that modernity has given so many band-aids for what wholeness looks like that we don't recognize that we're still wounded.
But we're not doing it. But the main thing is, as Larry mentioned last time we talked to him, or before we got booted off the platform, because
Larry.
But when Larry was talking, it was right.
He was fine.
People want authenticity, right? But they want to buy it. They don't want to go through the darkness to get there.
And that's the thing that R.J. Stewart writes so well in one of his texts, which is the fact that to be actually like followers of of Christ is to follow him, not just worship, means, I mean, when you go into the etymology of that, it actually means the desire to become. Emerson used to say, be careful what you worship, because that you will become that thing. Worship is a quality of wanting to become like what you are in relationship to. The other way of saying it though is that, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought.
You were saying, you were saying how like Christ didn't say do this, do that. He said follow me.
He said follow me, come with me. And the great thing about both R.J. Stewart and Stephen Clark and Henry Corbin is this idea that we have to become reoriented to where we actually are. And most people are wandering around kind of in a stupor still, whether it's to avoid pain, whether it's because they were told this is how you get your experience of God, this is how you do the things correctly by tradition. And there becomes that the roteness has, maybe to a certain extent, infiltrated so much that we forget what it feels like to want it. And
I have a synthetic statement, which could be that the evangelicals, the Catholics, were more prone, this is an overgeneralization, to say like, do this, not follow. The evangelicals, they say it, like Jesus didn't come to say, do this, he said, follow me, but they're not following him through the underworld. Is that
that's the whole point. They're not doing the work. The whole point is, and like, I'm not going to go like super esoteric on it, but the idea even that Jesus always says that, these and greater things you shall do in my name, right? And then the people use that as a blanket for doing all kinds of things, or to negate their power to do things at the same time, which always confuses me. But the whole point is, if we're all going to do the work, then let's all do the work. The idea, my issue with a lot of the staunch evangelical community is my faith is there. I said I believe these things. I'm good to go. And there's not really and I'm not, again, not saying that all things, but from the outside, as a child, especially as a teenager, I was wrestling with, well, what do I do with this Bible thing, this book, right? There's so much, there's nothing that we can do. This is very much a reformers kind of qualities, that human beings are so depraved that we can't do anything good on our own. Whereas the Catholic and the Orthodox keep that, I think, that imager quality still kind of inside them, that there's power in the spark that was been given to us as images of God, right? And that we have to go do the same things, not just he took care of it, the bumper stickers, the book said it, that's it, I believe it, and we're done. I think that faith is a verb. Belief, I think, is kind of a more mental construct. You kind of buy into an idea, but faith is something you have to do with your whole body. And I think we kind of have lost the incarnation of ourselves.
Holly's great Underworld novel, Porteous. I just think when you said,
I haven't read that.
Oh, it's great. It's 900 pages. It's really small.
I can get through it.
It's what he did. Yeah. But he has, just a great role for Pelagius in that. Right. And I've written a lot on, like, I could have a bumper sticker that said, like, Father, forgive me, I'm Pelagian as well as Augustine. I have Augustine and Pelagius in my breast. They have, that's everybody should. And Pelagius also got a bad rap in history. Powys was very familiar with that, but he's an underworld figure. Pelagius.
Yes. Very much so.
The other one, Augustine, was a little more transactional, as they say today. He was aware that, like, there's a doctrine of infant baptism that will actually, like, really fill the pews, folks. Well, honestly, they can prove that. They can prove that. Yeah. There's a Japanese Augustine scholar, Yamoto is his last name, or I forget. But they've we're so blessed that they've recovered in recent memory some documents of Pelagius, right? So we can hear, because it's all through Augustine. But you do get a sense that, like, infant baptism, like you're technically outside the fold, but you hear that unless you get this thing, baptism, you're going to spend eternity in hell. That's what, like, Romanides would say is the disease of religion, which Jesus came to cure. Because later on, that becomes obsessive compulsive disorder, right? Do this for that.
Right.
Everything's
It becomes very
transactional.
anxiety inducing,
Yeah,
right?
everything's
It's like,
transactional.
And that's what really I find very troubling in ortho bro and tradism and etc. I mean, you see, but it's not just that, it's just human condition, right? Is if I just do the right stuff, right?
yeah, I have
If I
professors
just tick off all the boxes, I got the okay, spiritual father, check. Fast like a maniac during Lent, check, right? I'll check all the boxes and like
Michael
why am I
Martin doing
feeling
stand
so-
up.
Which you see, but you see the same thing in those kids who go to get top and bottom surgery and they're still unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? This is the real that's no, you can't find fulfillment by checking off a bunch of boxes.
Right.
You have to,
That's a
as
great insight,
Einstein would say, you have to meet the guardian at the threshold, and you're going to meet him more than once, right? That's what
Really
you have
well
to go
said.
through. You have
Very
to
well.
face the dragon, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. And
So-
you have this in all of the early myths too. You have, Apollo wrestling with Python and Thor and Jormungandr. You have this quality of not just the idea of the serpent or nature of time or the nature of chaos. These are all things that become an issue. And even like going back to your point about the idea of feudalism, is like if Jesus came to speak against empire, how, and yet heaven is a hierarchy and a kingdom, how do you wrestle with how to implement that while we're hanging out here and trying to do the best of the human lives that we can to avoid putting boots on faces, and yet hierarchy seems to be naturally occurring even when you look at nature and you watch how soil becomes bodies become soil and the cycle continues.
I think we get it. Like that came up at breakfast this morning, that we just say hierarchy reforms, but when you think about it, like I think Ezra Pound, despite his anti-Semitism, you could read his poetry, but even like yeah, me too. But like just the symbol of usury, this infiltrates our brains, folks, that like once you just get used to just drawing off somebody else, whether it's a scorpion bite or whether it's a boot on the head, that I think we can do a lot more. And that's essentially why Guido Preparata walks this planet. He'd said, that we've accepted way too much, and we mythologize it and we enshrine it before we've done anything to try and rid ourselves of it. So instead of getting, usury spatializes time for one thing, right? There's this relentless ticking that, like, if I have money, it's sitting in the bank, it's sitting and breeding like rabbits, as Shakespeare said, which was a big lie. And it's the lie. It's the foundational
no, it is one of
lie.
the biggest. Yes, absolutely.
You think your ducats sit in a bank and breed like rabbits,
True.
And so and some of these other things that were what we're calling our faith, Lindsay, wants to move to, like, can we at least keep turning some of this over? But so much of what constitutes religion in our day is just reifying those things, and we're putting a soft patina on them, because the people who were in the underclass living on the manors in France that finally broke out in the French Revolution, like, they weren't as happy as we thought they were. Now, it's not to crap on the Middle Ages, totally, right? I'm not somebody who just like a Protestant would say the whole thing was tyranny. But, and I also want to make the case, if we were supposed to be getting rid of the last vestige of feudalism, it has to go with, complete total nonviolence. But also I'm not saying you should take it on a didactic argument. We're starting to see this stuff. Is it arising in the poets? Look at Shelley. It's all there. It's there. And it's beautiful. And so the new mythology is like the word liberty. You had a beautiful picture of a tree, God's returned, an old tree, Lindsay, on your Twitter. But sometimes this idea of like these, liberty, humility, kindness, these are gods in our time, the new paganism or something. But I don't know. I think we give up too quickly on what we might be able to undertake if we started ridding ourselves of these great pathologies.
Well, I think I totally agree. And I think that goes back to the fact that a lot of our culture, modernity, is a prolonged adolescence. And that, I had a professor in college who I adored, and he taught me that he was a Bible and literature program teacher. And he'd been a missionary. He had traveled over, he'd been in China, he'd been in Africa with his wife. He actually had, learned Hebrew and Greek to the point where he like translated like the Old Testament for himself as his own.
Yeah, right.
And then and my eyes like, oh my gosh, And he goes, everyone just wants someone to say, these are the rules. Go do these rules, it'll be fine. It's to tell me what you do and I'll do it. There's so much an application of responsibility and actual like presence as a embodied being. There's a tell me what you do to get my paycheck. There's so much transactional quality in our life in modernity, especially that we give up things far too quickly for convenience, for a paycheck, for just to leave me alone. Right, which is becoming more the case with so many people in this country, because just tell me to have you all leave me alone. But there's an application of knighthood, warriorship, divine feminine that comes up with those things.
They outsource their own authority, right?
And if
I don't want to have responsibility to think. I can't make a decision. You tell me what to do, right?
Yeah.
So here, I think we've actually bumped into it. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, I've been asking for a month or so now,
What does Lindsay owe you, Michael?
Well, no, it's not Lindsay. I've been asking in general, and even this popped up. I asked the question a month ago on Twitter, and it popped up again in the last couple of days. I don't know why. It's probably from those femme bots who go there and
they're everywhere, like whack-a-mole.
Black. But anyway, is Christianity something we can organically discover? And this is a big question, right? Or how does it? Can it be discovered organically?
How controversial am I to get, Michael?
Go for it. This is the regeneration. Just don't mention COVID
my first question, I won't use red flag words, but my first question would be, what do you mean by organically? How would you define organically?
Can you discover it in going into the underworld? Put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. I would say that if you want to go into the theophanic tradition, I'll go ortho-bro on this. If you want to go into that, Abraham did not need had something appeared to him. Moses did a good job by that. So did Paul. So the idea that you need to have what was great about the idea of like Henry Corbin, who was both a French Protestant philosopher and became very invested in like the Neoplatonist tradition within Sufism. He talks a lot about the fact that the divine is constantly reaching. There's always an infiltration, but you have to kind of meet it halfway. So I think that the idea of the angelic, the idea of this quality of intermission that happens, what used to happen in the Old Testament all the time, and all of a sudden we come to this place, Nicene Creed, that the Spirit only shows up when we're all gathered under Constantine's edict, and that after that it can't happen ever again, I think is misleading. And this is where I kind of ride the fence between like, Socratic Anglicanism and more traditional things. Is like when I go and I read the place where Jesus says, who they say I am, and Peter jumps in and goes, you're the Son of the living God, and he goes, my Father gave that to you. On that, and then next thing he says, on this rock I shall build my church. But he's not, for me, reading that as my little mystic self that I am, it's that moment of divine immediate intervention revelation that the church is built on. That moment of absolute knowing that it's given by the divine, by God, in that moment, that it's complete knowing. There's no belief necessary, because he knows, I know who you are. You can't believe in who someone is. You have to know them for have an actual relationship with them. Otherwise it's performance, right? So the idea that the Christianity can be discovered really depends on how you expect the creator and the anointed logos to act in terms of each individual soul, and whether if they're all worth saving, and they're not like just God sitting over here in the corner going, well, apologize, and then we'll see. But there's actually an investment of grace that happens. Then I remember being I think it was my last year of undergrad, and I was in a religious studies course, and we're discussing all manners of things, and I realized I brought in like the runaway bunny I go, this is a mystical tale. This is a religious story. Because what happens with the mother said, well, the little rabbi goes, oh, I wanted to go do this. She says, well, if you do this, if you become this, I'll become a fisher. If you become a fish, I'll become a fisherman. If you become a mountain, I'll become a mountaineer. I will come after, I will pursue you no matter where you go. And I'm always here if something happens, I'm always here. And the kid keeps, trapeze artist and this, and he keeps escaping. And finally he runs into the house and he goes, well, can I just be a bunny? Can I just be your son? And she goes, of course. And they hug, and that's the end. It's really sweet, but that's how I've experienced.
Francis Thompson's The Hound of Heaven too, right?
Yes.
He was an opium addict and everything, and just I stalked you down the alleyways.
Yeah. So I don't think that Christianity has blossomed in the Western tradition on the foundation of, I'm sorry to piss people off, on the foundation of the Greek mystery schools, Orphism, the Celtic nature of all the Druids, that come and that come into even parts of, France and what will later become Palestine. There's a quality of synthesis, and not synchronization, but just a synthesis of experiences that you have to go down to go up. You have to kind of, whether Peter Kingsley discussing Parmenides confronting Persephone, the mother of the dark places of the dead, where people come and lie, and back then in the idea of Greece, there's no idea of heaven yet. There's the Elysium, right? There's paradise, but you're not going to become, paradise is very different than say becoming an Olympian and becoming immortal. It's a very different, even that is a really interesting kind of concept. Where does the afterlife lead you? But this idea that, we're kind of almost into Lent season, right? This idea that Jesus comes all the way down. All the way down to make sure that even down to the smallest cell of creation gets reignited, and then the ascension happens. So I feel like if we're not willing to kind of go down to foundations, we're going to have a really hard time building new houses, new temples, new cathedrals in a post-modernity or alternative modernity that needs it so badly.
That was Lindsay Rose, ladies and gentlemen. That was brilliant. I mean, that's always worth the price of admission. It's only you, Lindsay. You're the only one saying that stuff so clearly, But don't you think one quick thing is lately in my thinking, that and this is Powisian too, but doing right because it's right. The system of rewards and so forth, right? This is a theme of where we are now, which is also an underworld theme. But the other one is like when Illich says that even the Beatitudes in our time are almost becoming, none of us love the word because we beat on science so much, scientifically provable, that you can see these things. So we're in an era where there's no such thing. We're just talking about truth. There's no such thing anymore as a set aside religious truth. And that gets to Michael's question about, is Christianity kind of provable, which you unpacked brilliantly.
Well, and I think also what happens is, there's a tension. You can't eradicate it. This tension between the intuition and mystical insight, and authority, right? And something that was brought to my attention in a really striking way. So Bonnie is on Saturdays. She has a Torah study group she does with some ladies in the neighborhood.
Cool.
And she always brings. She's got a King James Bible she brings, but she also brings the Septuagint. And one of the readings they did a few weeks ago was Proverbs 3. So check it out. I got to read this here. It'll blow your mind.
From the Septuagint?
Here, Proverbs 3. This is from the King James.
Okay.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Pick up your Bibles, friends. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. That's what it says in the King James, which like most Bibles is translated from the Masoretic text. But here's what it says in Septuagint, which is not. This is kind of
Masoretic. Yeah, they're very different in places.
Here it is. Trust in God with all thine heart, and be not exalted in thine own wisdom. In all thy ways acquaint thyself with her.
Wisdom.
With her, that she may rightfully direct thy paths. I mean, that's a pretty radical difference in translation, people, right? And that's from the Septuagint, which predates the Masoretic text. Now some people, I don't know if it's true, I'm not a biblical scholar, suggest that the Masoretic text arose in Jewish communities as damage control once Christianity came into
I
play.
think it's
And that's
true,
not the
right?
first time. I mean, if you talk to
Stop the poetry,
Margaret
snuff out the
Barker,
poetry.
right? Margaret Barker's, people act like no, and this is like the mythology in a not good way about the Old Testament, which has never been changed or edited. Ha ha ha. Yes, it has, right? Just like the New Testament has, because the victors write history, people, right? That's how it works, right? Don't pretend it didn't happen with the Bible. But that's an interesting.
Even says in Ezra, when they come back from battle, they're rewriting the book. Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, that's the point. But that's what happens though when you have a decentralized model, and that's why I spent so much time thinking about the early Celtic Church, which was on the fringes of the empire. Nobody was bothering with them, so it kind of happened organically. And we just celebrated St. Bridget's Day, for instance, right? And because that was so organic in a way there, it was almost like when we talked to Matthew Milliner, speaking of him, there are some Native American traditions, when the missionaries came here with Christianity, like, oh yeah, that guy, he was here already, right?
Right.
Dakota Sunday.
And actually, remember when we talked to Sarah Height about, I don't know, a year and a half ago? I just talked to her a couple days ago. Her husband was
She was
when
AI lady.
The AI lady,
Yeah,
but her
right.
husband used to go around the United States finding petroglyphs that were written in Paleo Hebrew. And he did the same thing in Petra. If you know where Petra is, Petra's the cool place where Indiana Jones finds the Holy Grail,
In
right?
Lebanon.
And he was there too. In fact, when they were living in the Holy Land, he was going there and he was again collecting some of this information from Petra, and actually from the mountain they say that is really the mountain, which is in Saudi Arabia, where Moses received the 10 Commandments. He brought me a couple rocks from there. And it's kind of cool because they're like sandstone, but the outside is scorched black. Let's think about that. Talk about the Underworld.
That's heavy. I'll never forget the moment in a graduate level Hebrew Bible class when the professor put before you were talking about the Masoretic text, which for our listeners has vowel accents where previously there hadn't been. But I remember he used the example, or no, I think this example comes from our friend Thomas Jude Germanario, who's brilliant on things, but it would just be, that, again, a stark view that this was poetry. The consonants HTRDBNS could be heat red beans, hot red buns, could be like a lot of different things. And whatever suggests itself to you, because the vowels weren't inserted. The Masoretic text was like, when they talk about the alphabet, you had the winged bird, then you flap it on the ground, like everything could just be brought down. Yeah. Same thing. That was a different version, like a Russian doll of the Masoretic text. Took this poetry and just slapped it on a page that became kind of an idol, right?
So yeah, in grad school, I was there was a rabbi who was teaching me Hebrew. I'd go and sit at his house in his porch or his garage, and he would smoke cigarettes while he was teaching me all the letters in the Hebrew. And what was amazing about this, and he would tell you how there's two things that you need to know about Torah. He said, for one, he says, as many souls that were standing at Sinai that day are different ways to read it. Well, that because the fact that your moral consciousness is what guides you into interpretation, because in the Septuagint, the original languages, there's no vowels, just like in Egyptian, there's no vowels. So where you place the vowels can change the entire story, story. And that the Torah is a world builder. As a narrative technology, as a divine technology, it creates worlds, but it depends on which story you choose. It's kind of like not quite choose your own adventure, but when you look at the fact that the Masoretic text is used in every single Christian Bible in the ever, you have a singular interpretation based on where they place the vowel structures.
That's where Margaret Barker is great.
Right. And so when I think about these things, I think about how this even deals with the idea of what Michael said in terms of Proverbs, and it's talking about this this idea of the divine feminine, or the Shekinah, or God's wife, or however they wanted to discuss these things. And I know different, denominations discuss this in different ways, but it actually reminds me of
Or don't discuss it in
or
different
don't
ways.
discuss, as the case may be. It reminds me of like Plato's idea of a noble lie. And I think that we tell certain narratives to arrive at certain outcomes in our society. And this is kind of what I wrote about a little bit in Jesus the Imagination, is that the stories that we tell construct our world. Even on when things happen that are wars or other types of things that happen out in the world, we read it on the news or we hear it happening and we get told this is so. And then we go out in the world and perform it as if it's so. That is a form of magic. That is a form of manifestation, because everyone's buying into a story. So what happens if you change the story? This is kind of what Blake is into, right? What you're capable of perceiving will change the outcome of what's there, because you are capable of having a perception that is beyond just the Guinea Sun machine, materialistic existence.
And they became what they beheld. That's what Blake's doing in Jerusalem, right?
Yes.
And when they can't resist, in a way, in Blake, when the characters can't resist the onslaught of lies, they split, right? Into the emanation, right? His emanation tears from the specter tears from, right? And it's a mess, right? It's a psychological.
But that's also how like truth consolidates error for Blake too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which is one of the hopeful things in our time. When I get really bleak, I just think, maybe, the people are speaking truth, because evil seems to get the ascendant, but it could just be evil's just consolidating in our time. And better to have it so simple to see, so we can name it like a demon and cast it out, as opposed to it was always implicit, And
that's the importance of discernment. And it's the idea also, we have such a linear, small section of time that we experience in our lives, right? Or even if you're reading back history, we have 5,000 years worth of information that we have in terms of the quote official historical record. We won't talk about things that don't get talked about, right? But when you look at what we actually can break down in terms of what we can fix, what we can change, it's such a small thing. We don't understand that there's something larger that's happening necessarily. That whether it's the ice age has ended 13,000 years ago, depending on your time scale, right? Or it was the last cataclysm that happened, the world is still adjusting to that change. In the same way that I think Stephen Clark has a lot, like we're still adjusting to, or even Steiner, we're still adjusting to the resurrection and the effects of how that's unfolding. So maybe the dark is rising, but it's like, if you have a wound, you've got to get out all the, pus. You've got to get, got to run it out and clean out. And maybe we're still purging. And what would that look like if we look at, I hear all the time that the church is meant to be not just a sanctuary, but it's a hospital, right? There's this idea that we're supposed to be healed when we go into it. And this is what Blake talks about all the time, is that Christ is healing bodies. He's healing the sick. He's making people be able to see, the lame. We're supposed to be given a corporality that actually can be penetrated and useful to spirit. And I think that even the pagan bros out there go super materialist. And I just don't, there has to be a synthesis. And this is what's actually great about Corban, is that he's talking about every single person has their angel. And the Greeks sometimes would call it a daemon, right? Their higher self, their angelic form. But that's your whole soul. So you have this bit of the divine walking with you all the time, even if you can't experience it. But that's like, we are so much more than we seem to be. I think we forget that all the time. And it's hard though, because the world looks terrible. It feels very doom and gloom. And I definitely suffer from that on occasion as well. I try to hold on to the fact that that the changes are still happening. I only can see this much of it though.
Yeah, a great scene, if you know the film, The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yes.
When
my
Jesus is talking,
portrait of that
Jesus is talking to Judas, I only get a little bit that's ahead of me. That's all I get. And you have to turn me in, right?
Crazy. Let me re-engage. Let me shift. I thought it was relevant before, but it was another breakfast conversation that made me think that I'd be talking to Lindsay later. Yeah. But this is going to seem like quite a departure, but I actually think it can crystallize some things. A phenomenon I guess I've seen two I remember distinctly, but I think I've seen more. I'm going to say it's a Twitter phenomenon. You see kind of a white girl that we're prone to hate now, obsessing on how she has to work 40 hours and she takes a subway in, and she has no money for life or anything. And what's been fun is to beat up on those people, right? Just say, oh my God, this complaining like wench or something. And the first one I saw, the girl was just perfect, almost like a Barbie doll. But I had a lot of sympathy for it, and I just think, we could, and people will say, okay, maybe there's something like we could have done it better. We're producing so much, but we're still artificial scarcity and everything.
Yeah.
But can we hear it from these? I want to say, they're not the ones to be articulating this message that we've built a world that's just so crappy. But I think it's not out of keeping with the gospel story to say we might hear it from areas we don't expect it. Like if there's one place the world thinks we're never going to get truth, it'd be a very wealthy, young, blonde girl, right? And but then this person said, and I think it kind of ties in. That's why I thought it tied into this conversation well. All these versions of masks we have to put on. I hadn't thought of this, but there was a book written in 1983 that somebody who was commenting on one of these videos of girl complaining said that was, it documented the energy it takes. A farmer can just have a miserable day and he doesn't have to hide it. So it was easier for him in this. I'm going to bring back Iowa. No, but honestly, it's easy for him to visit the underworld. If he's having a shitty day, it's just a shitty day. But all of a sudden, our youth and everybody had to go into, wherever you put on a smile, say, have a nice ma'am, we want it your way. And they're saying it's very, very, very exhausting. And we're asking people whether they're working in cubicles to put on a certain demeanor, whether they're doing customer service stuff at McDonald's or really anywhere, but to wear these false demeanors. And this was an angle on that phenomenon I hadn't thought too much about. What do you think, Lindsay? Again, because it made me think it's almost like we have to go for authenticity or die. Let's put no more masks. The human face, the persona. This is a big theme in the Trappist monastery work, the real face. Let's put all of our eggs in that basket, and it will transform society around it.
No, I think it's, I saw that kind of go viral online as well this past couple days. And what is amazing is the amount of absolute bitterness in people who see someone who's suffering and goes, well, she asked for it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's that idea of knighthood, or the idea of this protective quality of what the masculine does with the feminine. And like one of my favorite, I kind of like little throwaways is like, if he loves her, he'll build her a garden. And by that, I mean like a walled garden. Like there's a space that the masculine's a world builder by nature. He goes out and he creates skyscrapers and laws and society and all kinds of masterful works of art and a society that can be occupied. And then the feminine goes in and makes a home of it. So there's we hear about the words enclosure a lot. And there's a positive form of that, and there's a very, very detrimental form of that. I think what this woman is, this young girl is, and yes, people can say, oh, she should just move somewhere cheaper. There's all kinds of solutions that can be had, but the nature of what she's experienced is that if this is life, can I punch out? Because I don't want that. This does not feed me, and we're having we're starving for meaning, we're starving for purpose, we're starving for relationship, especially since what happened 4 years ago. We were all kind of isolated. We don't even know how to be in the same room with people anymore, let alone a community, let alone a city, let alone a 15-minute one. So like this quality of authenticity means, can you look the problem in the eye and not just go, well, I had to deal with that so they can deal with it too. How to say this is how it's always been is not a solution to anything.
That's a huge theme for me, as you heard, like whether feudalism or something. It's just, no, it's always been this way. I had a shitty job when I grew up.
And do you like it? And are you happy? And did you enjoy having to do that much? People talk about boomers all the time, which drives me crazy. I understand.
I'm guilty. But
I'm in the presence of, so it's like, I'm on the edge though, too. So I have to tread carefully, right?
No, I'm not a boomer, but I beat up on them too much.
Right.
Well, I don't even get that whole thing. I can't even tell.
There's a lot of resentment that the world is the way it is because boomers were essentially financially selfish. This is I think the bottom of the trope, basically.
It's crazy.
But you also have in the boomer population, outside of the trust fund babies that were, went from being hippies into yuppies, right? That whole pipeline is you have people who were very competent and learned actual skill sets to actually use in their lives. We have people who are plumbers and carpenters and actually know how to do skilled manual labor that have no replacement in the next 20 years because everyone wants to have an email job or be an influencer, So it's like, if you want for young girls or even people who are farmers, as Mike is saying, toil is kind of part of the human condition and we have to work hard sometimes, but for what purpose are we doing it? It's going to make all the difference. If we're doing it for some McDonald's or for some corporate sellout, hack, shell company, you're going to find the experience of how we do that, how we experience that very differently. If you were in love with what you do, it doesn't feel like work ever. And we know that. It's called passion. And we're very, very dry on that right now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And really dry on skills too, right?
No, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Dry on what, Michael? Dry on what?
Dry on skills.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I look at school, like my daughter currently is in a public school. It'll change next year, but that was a feasible thing I had to do. And I look at the competency of teachers that exist in public schools. I'm just like, you're training them for a role that probably isn't even going to exist in 18 years. Like, what are you doing? There's no humanity in it. It's just, Sir Kent Robertson talked about, the what's he called, the industrial line of education. And we're so there. The biggest issue I think happening the next probably 5 to 20 years is that if people can rescue their humanity or not, and that's going to be the biggest pivot of whether or not we submit to technocracy or transhumanism as just, it follows in so much this idea of escapism. Like, please just don't make it hurt anymore. Give me a way out. And people do that in all kinds of ways. They numb themselves with religion, with drugs, with alcohol, and maybe a computer, and maybe an upboot of consciousness to nowhere, to no man's land. They might, I can see the archons, as Michael and I talk about, being willing to make the earth so painfully inhabitable that it almost seems like a godsend and a mercy to go jump into a silicon body.
Wow.
Trying to do.
Crazy. Lindsay. Crazy good, crazy awesome.
This was like in my mind all day, gentlemen.
Yeah. So what we got to do is have Lindsay back on with like Steven sometime. That would be fun.
I would just sit and listen. I go, well, tell me more about all these things.
No. You guys would cross fertilize so well. But again, that was really great, Lindsay. And again, you're a fan favorite for a reason, because when you get going, there's a few things like it, and we learned so much. Yeah, absolutely. So, friends, we're kind of winding up the Regeneration podcast. Michael, what do you need people to hear? And Lindsay, look at Lindsay's article. Go buy. The 2 of the 3 will profit from this by name, and you will profit too if you read Lindsay's article in the most recent Jesus the Imagination. What's the title of your article again, Lindsay?
Storytelling in the Age of the Machine.
Yeah, it's really great. So much in there. And Michael, what's new with you?
Well, after I get off of here, I'm going outside to hang up syrup buckets.
Okay. When does your poetry book get? I'll do mine today too. Good call. When does your because we're gonna have a warm week here, I think, gets up to 50.
And cold at night. Sunny. That's when you want to do it.
I'm so glad you reminded me. I can do it today. So the Michael, when does your book of poetry come out?
Next month, it looks like.
Okay. I know
I was surprised because my publisher moved it to the head of the line, and it's going to have some really stellar artwork on the cover.
Yeah, I'm glad you came up with this theme because I'm so interested. But your book, you're saying
stop! Like Lindsay Rose did the cover, but
really?
Wow! And so it'll be out next month. He wants all the stuff by the end of the month, so usually it just takes a couple weeks after that.
Yeah. And this theme that we're still kind of novices learning to walk on this hunk of granite is a biggie in your book and poetry. I look forward to it.
Well, it's not that it's that I just think it's unexplored territory.
Yeah.
There are many stories still here, yeah.
We just been American literature has been mostly exploring the surface.
Yeah. Mike, I'll send you a link to this essay by Powys on his farewell to America. It's really good on this. It's really good on this. Yes. Lindsay's saying me too. Absolutely will. So thank you both. Lindsay, you're going to come on again, fan favorite. And everybody have a great weekend. Thank you for listening to the Regeneration podcast. We'll see you again.